Well, here I've got the new OB-X8. I can't believe it's quite here, and what a magnificent looking beast it is too. I first saw it in Super Booth, didn't get a chance to play with it. There was too many old blokes. I know I'm no spring chicken, but these guys, man, playing Jump. And then I couldn't listen to Jump another time, so I had to leave the room. But now I've got it, let's have a play. Keeping that to less than 10 seconds so I don't get any copyright claims. Sounds gorgeous though, doesn't it? Yeah, fabulous. Let's try another. You do hear there that we're in stereo and we've got various panning modes. We go into this page 2 and I'll talk about page 2 in a bit more depth in a minute because I sort of wish it didn't have page 2. Anyway, where are we? Pan mode. So let's go into pan width. Full, you've got full, half and quarter. So pan mode, 4 left, 4 right. Ping pong, exactly what you'd expect. Splayed, so this is where it goes from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we've got spread, so it sort of goes left to right and then into the middle. And then mono. Sorry, a bit sidetracked by the panning there. But what is this exactly? Well, it's a bit like the Prophet 5 Rev 4 is to the Rev 1, 2 and 3. The Oberheim X8 is a bit like the Oberheim OB-X, the OB-SX, the OB-X8 and the OB-8 in the one box. And if you like your Oberheims, you've got all the classic ones in this box. We've got different filter envelope modes, we've got different LFO modes, and we've got different filters as well. So all presets that you get on the OB-X, the OB-SX, the OB-X8 and the OB-8 are in here. We've got different banks. Let's come on to page 2. OB-X8, they're all the new ones. OB-8, OB-X8, OB-SX and OB-X. And here we are in the manual, showing you exactly what you get. And you can see there we've got a split and a double mode as well. We've got upper and lower voices, or upper and lower patches, 4 voices on each. Not my type of tone, I have to say. Definitely sounds like an Oberheim. We can change the balance between those two sounds. Quite nice. You can't do that on a Jupiter 6. While we're in these keyboard modes, we've also got unison, so take it off split. That's playing all 8 notes at once, or all 8 voices at once, I should say. We've got this vintage knob here, and this changes the sort of calibration of the filter and the envelope per voice. It also detunes it, but to access the detune, we've got to go back into this page 2. Let me find oscillator detune range. This will take it up to 61, so halfway. Change it up to 127. So that's nice, but I just wish it had a separate knob, because if I change the vintage mode now, the voice detune now picks up where this knob is, and as I say, it can only go up to 63. Sounds really nice though, doesn't it? But why on earth they just didn't stick another knob there for detune is beyond me. Okay, so we know what it is and what it does and a couple of its foibles, but what I've not mentioned yet is the actual size of it. It's an absolute monster. If you look at the size of the gap between each of the buttons and the knobs, and these buttons are just huge. Putting it up against the OB-X6, for example, you can see here the OB-X, and that's not a small instrument. There's plenty of space between all the knobs and the buttons, but on the OB-X8, it's just vast. It's an absolute monster of a thing. It absolutely dwarfs the OB-X, and that means it really does feel like you're playing some big old synth. It sort of feels a bit like my Prophet 600, for example, or the Poly 6. They've all got this much space. Well, I don't actually think they've got this much space, but it does mean that it's got this vintage feel. It is the old synths all in one box, but it does feel a bit like it's not a modern synth with the extra bits on it. It's all the old bits with a few modern twists. So it's like pendulum between modern and classic, and there's a little balance there. And I do think that there's compromises along the way. Like I say, that you could really do with the extra knob there. And for the filters, for example, there's actually a high pass, a band pass, and a notch in here somewhere, but you've got to go into page 2 to find it. Just give me another button that says high pass, low pass, and notch. It's not like there isn't room, is it? But I do think Tom Oberheim really wanted to keep it to the ethos of the originals, but then the originals did have extra bits added to them, like the volumes of the oscillators, for example. I'll come to that in a second, but it just feels a little bit like it's, for me at the minute, after a few days, I'm feeling a little bit like it's too much of the old synth and not enough of a new synth. But anyway, let's move on to what it actually does, and let's take a look at the oscillators. As you'd expect, we've got the sawtooth, we've got the pulse, go a bit lower, and that's as low as you're going to get unless you put it in split mode. You get a triangle by having none of the buttons pushed. And I can't remember which of them had the triangle and which of them didn't, but it's here. And it does go rather high. It's a bit like one of those whistling apps for dogs and cats, that, isn't it? So we've got 2 oscillators. Let's put 2 on. We bring them in, mixing them in the filter. And they're either on or off unless you go into page 2. Oscillator 1 level. Oscillator 2 level. Noise level. Turn it on. Let's go back into oscillator 2. Let's put them back on full. And I know it goes against the ethos of the Oberheims, but I might have to duck and cover when I say I just wish they were knobs, and it'd make life so much more simple. Anyway, we've got cross mod and we've got filter envelope control of oscillator 2. So cross mod, bring it in, and this is oscillator 2 modulating oscillator 1. So oscillator 2 is not in at the minute. That works. Sounds nice as well, doesn't it? The detune for oscillator 2 is over in the control section. And as you can hear, these tune by semitone. And there are plenty of patches making the cross mod sound much better than I just have. And that's modulating with a pulse of oscillator 2. We can modulate with triangle of oscillator 2 as well, but guess where that is? Okay, oscillator 2, triangle, X mod. Let's take the X mod off for now. That's oscillator 2 now modulating oscillator 1 with a triangle, not a pulse. So there's loads of extra little things in this. In fact, there's 41 different pages of stuff in page 2, 41 different parameters you can tweak. So when you first get it, it feels much more limited than it actually is. And just going back to the pulses for a second. This knob here controls the pulse width of oscillators 1 and 2. If we put oscillator 2 on a pulse as well. But we do have, again in page 2, different modes for oscillator 2 square wave. So this is on OB-X, OB-X8, on OB-8. Not sure what the difference is there actually. It may be the way it modulates things. Well, it's making some sort of difference, isn't it? And as I said earlier, we can modulate envelope 2 with the filter envelope. So we go to here, this red light. Let's take a listen to oscillator 2 again. Let's put onto a sawtooth. And now we change that modulation amount using the filter modulation knob. So that's linked to the filter frequency, isn't it? So if you're low, so the filter envelope amount of modulation on oscillator 2 is linked to the amount of modulation you put on the filter itself. You can't decouple that, as far as I can tell anyway. There may be something else in page 2 I've not found yet. But I don't think so, I think it's an Oberheim thing. And obviously you can sync that. But it doesn't have to sound crap like that. There's actually good patches in here. I think that brings me to the end of the oscillators, so let's take a look at the star of the show, and that's the filters. And you can see that doesn't look too bright. The resonant peak's only about 4K. That's because I've got the modulation down, so I've got the sustain up. So it's got a really beautiful tone, but it doesn't self-oscillate. It's quite mild and timid, I suppose, from that perspective. I think this is 12 dB and it's the OB-X filter. peaks up there around 18 kilohertz. Let's try the XA, and this is XA 4-pole. Nice, well behaved. Then if we go to both lights on, this is the OB-X8. A lot quieter there with the resonance up, turn the resonance down. They sound all very nice and Oberheimy, and they would do because they're Oberheims. I did say we've got a high pass, a notch, and a band pass, and that's in here, page 2. Filter type, here we go, page 11. We've got an SEM 2-pole high pass. We've also got a band pass. And we've got a notch. I do like a notch. I just wish I didn't have to scroll through to menu item 11 on page 2 to find them. I just wish there was a little, another button, there's room for it. But we can also access all the other filter types from this menu here. You can see the lights changing. We've also got keyboard tracking, but obviously because it doesn't self-oscillate, you can't just play the filter on its own, but it does get quite resonance on, I think it's the X4A. Let's turn that up. Let's have a listen. It's on the X. So you can hear it self-oscillating, but it needs an input to do it. You can definitely hear a second oscillator there, can't you? So you can do all those organy things. Although it doesn't quite sound like an organ, does it? It sounds like an Oberheim organ. And there are organ tones in here, but I don't think they've got the drawbar sound. Let's find one. Sounds like an organ. Another one. These are OB-8 sounds. Nice, but I digress from the filter. We can change the keyboard tracking amount, but you guessed where it is. It's in page 2. Keyboard tracking amount. So you can change the amount of tracking. And I think that's all the menu options for the filter. So filter type and filter keyboard tracking. Next up then, we've got envelopes, different envelope types. So that's the OB-8 curve, and this is the OB-X. So there are distinct differences there. Let's try it on a bit of a snappier tone, shall we? OB-8. Bit smoother on the OB-X. Then we'll move over to the modulation, and the modulation is much more complex than it looks actually. So we can see here we've got a single LFO, although we do have an LFO down here as well. So let's call this LFO1, and we've got different destination paths. So let's just modulate oscillator 1. Okay, we've got various waves here. We can see we've got sine, square, and sample and hold. Plus, if we push these two, we get a ramp up. These two, we get a ramp down. Now, we've got these two destination paths. Why are they called destination paths? Why isn't it just destinations? And that's because we've got a separate envelope for each of these. We've got an attack and a delay envelope for both. So let's put, oh, you guess where it is? It's in page 2. Let's go to, we are mod 1. Mod 1 delay time, let's turn that up. Let's put it onto the square. Turn it down again. And we've also got an attack time. So as I say, a lot more going on here than at first appears. So let's put a bit of delay time on and then some attack. So yeah, much more complex than it at first appears. We've got a delay time, we've got attack time, we've got an envelope type, normal or inverted, so you can invert it, which it doesn't look obvious that you can from the front panel. And then we've got this quantize as well, which is really nice. Let's put it onto a ramp. Let's turn the attack time down and the mod time down. Turn the quantize on. And that's quantized into semitones. So there are loads of nice little bits in here. Here's another one, modulation 2 envelope to the LFO speed. And for the modulation, it's not a bad thing going into page 2 to look for stuff. It's what you do on pretty much anything, isn't it? I just wish some of the other bits were a lot more accessible. Anyway, let's move over down to the to this control panel, shall we? And the levers on this are quite cool. They're inverted to what you'd expect. You normally have to push up for a pitch to go up and down for the pitch to go down, but this, you can change it if you want, but I quite like it. More modulation, pull it towards you. And that rate on that LFO, this is the rate down here. So as I say, there's a separate LFO. And we can access the arpeggiator or the modulation settings using this mode button here. So here we can modulate oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 separately. On the bend we can have oscillator 2 only, and then on the amount this actually changes the amount to a separate one that's in the global settings. It's normally a tone or an octave, so quite cool. And then obviously if you're in double mode you can change the upper and lower and do different things for each of those. Got transpose up and down. But I feel like it'd be nicer to have 2 up and 2 down, maybe with that flashing, just to give you a little bit more extra bass actually. And then there's the arpeggiator. Let's just put it back on a basic program. Now this is a weird arpeggiator. It doesn't work exactly like most other arpeggiators do. Let's turn it on. When neither the down or the up button are pressed, it plays it randomly. When it's down, it plays it the reverse. So it's not playing it down, it plays it the reverse order of the notes you pressed. So when it's up, it plays it in the order you played them. just a bit weird, and then you can play additional notes on top of that. But unlike other things, it doesn't continue playing them, it doesn't remember them. Putting the hold key on and then pressing the master hold. Holds them. And now, unlike other things where it'll play another chord, it's not changing the chord on the arpeggiator, it's playing just the notes on top. So a completely different arpeggiator experience, and if you're a big fan of your old Oberheims, you probably love all that. I find it a little bit confusing, but I've only had it a couple of days, haven't I? But maybe I'll learn to love it, or maybe not, I don't know. It's just a bit weird. But yeah, if you like that sort of thing, it's there. So what else haven't we looked at yet? Let's have a look at the chord mode. We've got a press hold, and I've got the chord. And another little weird thing here is that the chord always plays the root note you played at C0 down here. So if I want to play that lower, I mean, we can play on top, but it's just a bit odd. I feel like it would be nicer if it played the chord from the centre. So if I play something that I like, whoops, turn the chord on. I haven't quite worked out how to do that smoothly. If it was in a gig and I wanted the chord mode, I'm not sure what to do. So you've got to press hold. Now I've got the chord, but if I play it here, it's 2 octaves high. Here it's low. But if I want to go any lower, I can't. So if I want to do something low, I have to hold and play a chord low. So now I've got the chord, plays it the same down here, which means just feels like everything's getting played really low. It'd be nice if in a firmware update they could change the sort of root note from C0 to C2 or C3 perhaps, just to give you the option. But it does have chords, just a bit weird how it holds them on. Always get that little punch. So I suppose in a gig you'd have to turn it down to do it, but anyone taking this to a gig is crazy because it costs £5,000. So for the studio, I suppose it's okay. Yeah, it sounds like I'm having a right old go at it actually, but there's just a few little niggles in it that I think need to be improved, and a few design choices that I wish they hadn't made, to be honest. What else have we got up here? We've got the unison mode. Let's take a look at that. So, to change the number of voices in unison mode, you go to, you guessed it, page 2. Unison mode. Oh, the bend lever amount is actually in page 2. Where are we? A couple of little extra things you can do with that chord mode. Actually, you can change it so the chord mode won't play high up, stuff like that. But let's not worry about that, because I'm looking for unison mode. Unison voices, 8, so 1, 2, 3, so you get the idea. It'd be nice if you pressed unison and 8, just make it easier. Let's detune that. And then again, if we want more detune, it's page 2. Where was it on page 2? Voice detune, page 8, or menu number 8. Sounds great though, doesn't it? Cool, well I think I've covered everything. I've not been playing lots of different things on it. I might stick some at the end if I get a chance before I finish editing this. But what are my final thoughts? Well, I think I might have worn my heart on my sleeve a little bit too much during this review. I have only had this a couple of days, and there's no doubt it sounds absolutely gorgeous. I've never owned an OB-X or an OB-8 or an OB-SX or an OB-X8, like most people haven't. But people that have do say it sounds like it, and it does sound really, really good. But it feels like it hasn't made the most of the opportunity to redesign those old synths. So I think, as far as I can tell from the manual, a couple of the extra things like the oscillator levels were add-ons or firmware updates to the original synths. Would have been that, and the reason why you do the firmware update is because it's a useful thing to have. So why not just put them as knobs here? Why not have a knob for the vintage, sorry, for the detune range here? There's plenty of space for a knob. It wouldn't look terrible if there was 2 knobs there rather than just 1, would it? It wouldn't look terrible if there was an extra button here. You can see we've fitted in the same space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buttons here. Why haven't we got 6 buttons there with a different high pass, low pass and band pass, for example? Just, you know, why haven't we got the envelope type as a little button down here? Just doesn't make sense to me why there's so much real estate on the front of this and these huge buttons, and there's little things that you could have done just to make the menu diving a lot less, because every time I make a sound, I'm telling you now, I'll be going in and having to change the oscillator levels. Maybe that's not the Oberheim way. If it wasn't the Oberheim way, why did they add it in the firmware in the first place? I don't know. It just feels a little bit like there's a compromise too many, actually. And I'm really considering sending it back. I'm gonna have to play with it a bit more. You saw my Jupiter 6 sort of rant, as it were. You know, it's like, why would you pay this much for an old synth when it doesn't do this, doesn't do that? And then 2 weeks later, I absolutely loved it. So that may well happen, but as things stand, I'm a little bit disappointed. I just think there's too much menu diving for a synth that costs £5,000. I'm really on the fence at the minute with it, because it's a super expensive thing, nearly £5,000, £4,700, something like that, which is ridiculous really for what it is. So if it was £2,000, I wouldn't be so bothered, but you know, when there is the OB-X8, and I'll put it up against the OB-X8 before I send it back. I might not send it back. You know, when you've got the OB-X8, why do you need this? I'm really considering, you know, why I've got it. So I will let you know. I'll put a few sounds at the end so you can have a listen to it with a little bit of reverb and sounding quite nice. But I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. I hope it hasn't put anyone off this. I think it's still worth getting. If you're into your OB-X's and your OB-X8s and your OB-X8s, you know, you've got one here. But it is a shrinking market, isn't it? I hate to say it. But yeah, anyway, I hope that was some use to somebody somewhere. If it was, please think about subscribing, ring the bell, check out my affiliate links below for Thomann and for Perfect Circuit. It doesn't cost you any more, but one day I might get some cash from it. it might help me make a decision on whether to keep this or not, but yeah, it all helps to support the channel, and I will see you next time.
Música